p.m. Please stand and join me in a salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Withers, would you please read the loan order?
I will, and I'm going to abbreviate it a little bit, but we are here to continue a public hearing relative to the following loan order. That the City of Attleboro, or the city, acting through the Attleboro Municipal Council, appropriates the amount of $259,918,180 for the purpose of paying the cost to design, construct, equip, and furnish a new high school located at 100 Rathbun-Willow Drive, Attleboro, Massachusetts.
Thank you. To speak in favor this evening is the mayor and his team that he brought tonight. So first up, Mayor Hero. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. First of all, I want to start off by saying I'm sorry for the miscommunication we had. You were expecting a presentation. I was expecting questions. Nobody got what they expected, and the public was left without any information. So I'm glad we're all here again tonight, and hopefully, you know, I've got a great relationship with Mark, Council President Cooper, and Vice President Parika, and so we spoke after the first half last night, and we spent a lot of time together today. So hopefully this will answer a lot of the questions you have. Basically, you know, going into this, my mindset was a lot of people have a lot of questions about this, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about the things that I would have answered, and hopefully this will answer a lot of the questions you and the public may have. A lot of this is going to be information that you have heard before. Maybe we'll fill in some gaps, but for the sake of being thorough, we should take you from A to Z tonight. We are basically asking for approximately a $260 million bond authorization. Roughly half of that is going to be paid for by the state. The city's share is going to be about $133 million. However, we've done several things to kind of minimize the burden on taxpayers. The first thing is that we looked at the $133 million and we said to ourselves, how can we further reduce that tax hike? Instead of raising taxes $133 million, how can we reduce that so we don't have to raise as much? We came up with a number of things, and we were able to reduce that down to about $126 million. One of the things we did is working with the school administration. They were planning on selling three surplus schools. And these three schools, we estimate, could sell for maybe $3 million, maybe $2 million, maybe if we're lucky, $4 million. But the reason we started talking about that was because we wanted to pick up the cost of the administrative portion of the new high school. The administrative portion of the new high school is not going to be covered by the MSBA. So that's basically the superintendent's office. And so with that in mind, I said, we have one of two options. We can either not build that portion of the new high school, or we can find another way to pay for it. Because if the MSBA is not going to pay for it, then we've kind of reasoned maybe we shouldn't have the taxpayers pay for it by raising taxes. We want to just keep this as bare bones as possible. So that's when, sitting with Dave Sawyer, Steve Withers, it might have been one or two other people with us at that time. We said, okay, we'll sell off the three buildings, the three schools, and we estimate that could go for about $3 million, and then we'll bring that down, that 133 down to 130. So that's, and the balance of that would, of paying for that $6 million would then be used with existing debt capacity. So if we spend, excuse me, rephrase it, if we sell those buildings for $2 million, to pay the $6 million for administrative portion, we're going to go ahead and use about $4 million of existing debt capacity. If we sell the buildings for $4 million, we'll use existing debt capacity for the remainder too. So if we sell the buildings for $1, we'll use existing debt capacity for about $6 million. So that was one thing. Another portion was that Budget Director Lacasse, he found over $1 million in the 3011 sheet, which I believe everybody should have a copy of at this point. Good. So on the 3011 sheet, there are different things that our budget director was able to say we could probably use, free cash to pay for. It was about $500,000 of moving CTE equipment. We could use free cash, a one-time expense. We could use that. There was also, actually, let me look at this for a second because he actually listed it for us. The asbestos, floor abatement, materials abatement, that was good for another $700,000. And, the feasibility study, $400,000, that was all paid for. So by doing all these things, we went from the $133 million that the city is basically going to be responsible for after MSBA reimbursement. That brought us down to about $126 million. So now, how do we pay for that $126 million? There's different ways we can go about that. We could try and use even more existing debt capacity, but if we do that, we really tie our hands on a lot of other city projects. Or we could go ahead and bond for it, and that's what we're doing. Now, originally, the thought was to do a 20-year bond, and that left us with approximately, if we look at the average household, that left us with about average house costs about $280,000. If we were to bond for that at 20 years, the average payment over the course of 20 years would be about $393. Now, that's a lot of money for some people. Attleboro is a gateway community. Our median household income is below the state median. There are a lot of people who can't afford or have a really difficult time affording $393. So there was a large group of folks that came together in a room, and we said, how can we get that down without cutting anything away from the current school? And I'm going to read off the list of folks who were part of that work group that we had, and that was me, Laurie Gignac, our treasurer, Dave Sawyer, superintendent of schools, Steve Withers, the chairman of the school committee, Mark Furtado, the chief financial officer of the school department, Deborah Gould, our city auditor, Barry Lacasse, our budget director, Stan Nasowitz, our chief assessor, Lynn Foster, who is with Unibank and also bond counsel, and Lauren Galvin, our city solicitor. So we hashed out a lot of different ideas, but basically we went from a 20-year bond to 30 years. That's the most common mortgage that people have. People take 30 mortgages. Why do you do that? Because it makes the payment more manageable. I have a 30-year mortgage. I know several of you have a 30-year mortgage. It makes it more manageable. Ideally, we'd like to take out a 10-year mortgage on our homes, but our monthly payments would be extremely high. Ideally, to save on interest, we would like to do this 20 years, 15, even 10. What would be really nice is if every citizen in the city could just say, here's my check, to pay for the city up front, and we wouldn't have any interest of payments to make. But that's just not the reality. So we went to 30 years, and that brought us down from the $393 on average for an average $280,000 house. That brings us down to $277. Now, that's a lot more manageable. Even if there are people who would say, I can afford $393, I can afford $277, we still have an obligation to watch out for people who can't always make ends meet with ease. And there are a lot of people in the city who are struggling and who still $277 is going to hurt. Even if we could get this high school passed at 20 years at $393, we still have an obligation to people that we live with in this community who are struggling to make ends meet. And like I said, we're a gateway community. A lot of folks in the community, they're hurting, and so by reducing it to $277, it makes it more manageable for them. Now, so there's some arguments that, like with people who, like, I'm just gonna go into a couple of the arguments about like this going to 30 years, going from 20 years to 30 years. Like I said, most of us have a 30-year mortgage, so it's pretty standard. One of the arguments why this is not a good idea is because it adds an extra $40 million in debt to the city. Okay. That ends up being about $4 a month for that average house. That's how much extra over those extra 10 years you're paying. The extra 10 years brings us from 393 down to 277. Over that course of the 10 years, that $40 million ends up being $488.18. That's the best estimate we have based on today's assumptions and today's market and today's rates. $488 extra. The way I look at it is that a lot of people in this room, people who are going to vote yes on this, and even for the people who want to vote no on this, adding that extra $40 million in interest over the course of those 10 years, what that's going to allow us to do is make it more manageable for the low cost of an extra $488 a year. That's $48 a year. Thank you, Peter. $48 a year. $488 over the course of 10 years. Like I said, that ends up being about $4 a month. So all this concern about going an extra 10 years and bringing on the city an extra $40 million in debt, $4 a month. And we have checked this and rechecked it. We have scrutinized the heck out of these numbers. It's a worthwhile trade-off. We're making this a lot more manageable. I have a simple equation that I like to think about this with. If we can bring the cost down for the average taxpayer, more people are able to vote yes. It's very basic. You know, if you can make it more manageable, people can vote yes. In my experience, if this weren't to pass, people are going to say for one reason only: I couldn't afford it. So we had an obligation to try and bring that cost down as much as we could. A couple other things that people have talked about is that, you know, we're not using any of the city's existing debt capacity. That's just not true. Like I said before, we're going to use existing debt capacity to pay for whatever the balance is left over from the sale of the 3 schools to pay for the administrative portion of the new high school. Another portion was, another argument was that we are not using any of the city's existing operating budget. And again, that's not true. Budget Director Lacasse, he found over $1 million in ways we could pay for different things using the existing revenues that we have. There's been a lot of, misinformation about this, this project. The numbers that we have, though, the amount of money that people are going to be paying on average, $277 for a home, it ends up being just around, there's a way to calculate this, and we will be able to put something like that on the city website, per 100,000. So the average house is $280,000, but not everybody's house is $280,000. If you there's a multiplier on the sheets that you guys got, how much you would pay for if it were $100,000. So if your house is worth $500,000, you could easily calculate that. But all the numbers are available. Doing this type of analysis, doing economic forecasting, is about assumptions. It's not an exact science. It's the sort of thing where you cannot actually predict exactly how much someone's going to pay every single year. You're giving them a really close estimate, and it's a very close estimate, one that I, as a homeowner and a taxpayer, and even after I'm out of office in Attleboro, I'll still be comfortable paying. These are things that we're going to be very close to what we're looking at right now. So interest rates fluctuate. We don't know when the market is going to crash again. Home values are going to decrease. We don't know when we're going to have another bubble, when home values are going to increase. But based on today's conditions and what we reasonably expect, this is what we projected. So a couple other things. This is a sheet that all of you had. If I can, where's the 30-year? So looking to see if there's any other high-profile questions that people are asking. Did I leave anything out, you guys? Anything else we were talking about?
Yeah, stole all my thunder.
Yeah. So okay, there's another one. Yeah, thank you, Jack. Another thing that we did was we changed the payment structure a bit. There's a difference between level debt and level principal, and our city treasurer Laura Gignac, she'll be able to explain exactly what that means. But I can tell you the consequence of what it means. Basically, if we have level debt versus level principal, the previous payment structure that we were talking about under $393 at 20 years, it had a spike that went up to, I think, about $590. That was what that $280,000 house was going to pay for. So it'll go up, The highest year would be about $590. And then it would slowly taper down. It was sort of a bell-shaped curve skewed to the left. The highest, most expensive payments are on the left. But again, we wanted to flatten that a little bit so that the amount people would be paying extra on top of what they're already paying would be flattened out. That added a little bit more in interest. But the consequence of it was to, instead of having a big spike where you have very low payments of $25 and a very high payment of $590, it flattens it out. And basically that $280,000 house, the highest payment anybody would make on that house is $444 over the course of those 30 years. And that would actually come, I believe, in the third, fourth year, and it would just continuously go down. And that's actually another, so going to level level debt is actually the better way to go. It adds a little bit on interest, but it does flatten it out. It makes it more manageable. Again, if we can bring the cost down, make it more manageable, we can get more people to vote yes, and that's what the goal is. I know Councilor Holmes had asked me a question about when is somebody going to make their first payment on this, this additional taxes, and that wouldn't come until the fourth quarter of 2020. So the payments are not going to suddenly happen. You guys vote yes, the city votes yes April 3rd, boom, you slam to the tax bill. Wouldn't happen like that. It would actually, your first payment would happen probably, your first hike that you would see on your tax bill would be fourth quarter of 2020. Those are the highlights. That's what people want to know from our estimation. The average payment is $277 a year. The highest somebody would make is about $444. We believe that we have made this as manageable as possible, and that was the goal. Bring the cost down, make it as manageable as possible, make it as level as possible, make it as predictable as possible, show people that they have the confidence. All of us up here, we hashed out different ideas. We all had different ideas about things, but we all are standing here together, and we're in agreement that this is the best proposal that we have for this. No one gets everything, everyone gets something. If most people like most of this, that's a win. That's what we're hoping for. I personally would rather pay $20 years, because then I wouldn't have to pay that extra $488 in interest. I think that's probably several of us. But if it helps get the school to pass, let's stretch it out over the course of 30 years. So I'm going to stop now. I have a good team with me, and we're ready to take any questions from you. I'll be happy to take any questions, and go ahead, fire, Mr. Cooper. President Cooper.
Why don't we have Mr. Lacasse go through what he went through with us this afternoon,
Sure.
And then we can ask either or both questions if the council has them.
So these are different sheets that should hold, there's a lot of data on it, but Barry is going to take us through and explain exactly what it is. A lot of what I just said, I just gave a summary of what we're passing out right now. This is just a summary.
I didn't get one, no.
That's it, thank you.
So I just gave the 10,000-foot point of view. Now, that's us or Stan. Ready to answer some questions that are more new to you later.
And there's more.
You just have to tell me.
Oh, geez. Same more than you've seen.
Please tell us that now. Start from the bottom.
Thank you all for inviting us here. It's true. I want to thank Mayor Hero for going through the entire memo. I think one question on them, major aspect of the memo, which is very important. He did it without even reading the memo, which is impressive. But so I want to start our portion with there any questions based upon what the mayor had just told you? Because again, a lot of what he just told you is in the memo.
Sure, just a quick starter question. I've heard the mayor mention over and over again that, you know, compare this to a 30-year mortgage and talk about how if people have a 30-year mortgage, then this is similar and this makes sense. But in my mind, a mortgage for a home, you know, people on average sell their home every 10 years. They make large down payments and they get all sorts of tax incentives based on the interest paid on that. What do other towns, when they build a high school on average, what do other towns, how long do they bond their schools for?
It's irrelevant. The reason it's irrelevant is because they have a different socioeconomic status than Attleboro. You can't compare out like one community to another. When I used to work in jail and prison, we never compared recidivism rates from one jail or one state or one county to another because the factors that make up that entity are always different. So the most common mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. I have one. You have a 30-year mortgage yourself. You know, that's sort of irrelevant. I mean, each of us are.
Do we know what other towns do bond their schools at?
It's irrelevant.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can, I can certainly ask around. I'm sure that there are those that have 30 years. I'm sure there are the 20 years. I'm sure it varies throughout the Commonwealth, but I'm happy to.
Just out of curiosity.
Happy to look into it for you.
I think Council Hall has a question.
I do. Yes. I know you're planning on selling the 3 buildings, so I guess my question is, what happens if you, how confident, let's just say, how confident do you feel that you can sell those buildings?
Sure. So as the mayor mentioned earlier, let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that we sell them for $3. Ridiculous example, but
That's okay.
on page 2 of the sheet, the memo that I handed out, you'll see 2 $3 million line items. If one of those line items becomes $3, then the other one will become the balance of it. So the mayor has committed to picking up whatever slack there is in the sale of those buildings in the general government. We hope to get 3 or 4, but we might not.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the reasons we didn't want to cut out the administrative portion of the new high school, the superintendent's office, if you will, the reason we didn't want to cut that out because it's not reimbursable, as I said earlier. If we were to do that, it would almost like be going back to the drawing board. That would waste a lot of time and a lot of money, and we might not actually, we looked at this, I looked at it, I talked to Skanska, we had these conversations. If we had redesigned the high school proposal that we're looking at right now, it would have basically been moving around walls. We would really need to give the architects, you know, another $1 million to do this. It just wasn't worth it. That's why it was worth keeping the administrative portion in the school, finding a way to pay for that to help reduce the amount we would need to raise taxes by. And as you know, Budget Director LaCascio said, you know, whatever we don't get from the schools that we need to pay for the administrative, we have our existing debt capacity. Now, it'd be nice to be able to use that for other projects in the city, but you know, we need to make this as manageable as we can for people.
Thank you.
And Mr. President, I just want to mention one other thing. I neglected to not add Jack Jacoby, the Vice Chair of the School Building Commission, on the list of people who were collaborating with all of us towards getting this information to you.
Jack was at all of the meetings.
He was.
So, do you want to just take us through what you did this afternoon?
I'm happy to. If we want to begin with the first question on page 1, what is the total project budget for the new high school? What you have in front of you, if you have the documents in order, you'll have a 2-page spreadsheet. And this is the total project budget that MSBA has approved. We call it a 3011. It looks like this.
And not to interrupt you, Barry, but this is on the city's website, is that right? Thank you.
Yes, if you go to the city's website, under the Attleboro High School project, you'll see under the last bullet, I think number 15, it'll say schematic design. Click on that. It's a rather large file, but this is part of it.
Perfect, thank you.
So if you
see that, you'll see on the second page of that 3011, right in the middle, you'll see four numbers. And at the same time, if you find your sheet that looks like this, I can walk you through how the reimbursement rate was applied to the total project, because it's not simply taking 66.65% and multiplying it by an estimated budget of $256 million. That's not how it works. So going back to this spreadsheet right here, we start with the $256,517,297 estimated budget. That number came from that 3011 in the second column at the bottom. Everybody see that? From that, we have to exclude what are known as ineligible costs. There are certain things that the MSBA will not pay for, so we have to back that number out. That leaves us with an estimated basis for a maximum grant of $188 million. It is that number that we first apply the reimbursement rate to. You'll see the calculation, which leads to $125,492,051.81. That's the estimated grant before recovery. What is recovery? We have a fairly new roof at the Attleboro High School that we're still paying for, and much to my chagrin, MSBA wants some portion of that back because they paid for a portion. So that's their cost recovery. That is based on a pro rata estimate or calculation based on the age of the roof. So we back off the 125, a 1.215 cost recovery. That leaves us with an estimated grant before contingencies of $124 million. Now, MSBA will help pay for our contingencies, which is always nice. So we have two contingencies for this project. We have a construction contingency of $2.2 million, and we have an owner's contingency of $1.1 million, for a total of $3.4 million. We next apply that reimbursement rate to those two contingencies, making an eligible amount of contingencies at $2.2 million. And then, so we add the estimated grant, which is line G plus line L, and we come up with an estimated grant of $126 million. And then we take line A, we add line J, and we subtract the estimated grant, and that tells us what our share is, which is $133 million. That is the $133 million that the mayor talked about a little while ago, in which he identified certain costs that we can subtract from that, which leads us then to the $126 million. So, in your spare time, feel free to go through that 3011 and let me know if you have any questions. I blew it up as much as I can on ledger paper, but it's still, for some of us in the 50s, it's still hard to read. You also have a sheet that shows how we arrived at the 65% reimbursement rate. We received certain points from MSBA, which were added to our base points, and I just included that sheet for your perusal. So next I also, by the way, included a article from the Sun Chronicle from January, because I think it provides a starting point for the $277. So it's good to have that as a reflection as to how the 277 was introduced, when it was introduced. Next, we go to one of the most complicated portions of, I think, tonight's discussion, which is the spreadsheets, which helps us calculate what the average impact to the taxpayer is. I know that some of you have gone through this and perhaps even have your own. As the mayor mentioned earlier, these spreadsheets are the result of a collaborative effort of all those people that we listed in this memo. They're an effort of using the best data that we have today and reasonable forecasts based on historical data going forward. As the mayor mentioned earlier, this is not an exact science. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add to that about this spreadsheet. Not only is it the people that were listed in the memo in addition to Jack Jacoby, who was not on there, when you look at Lynn Foster from Unibank, Lynn represents Unibank, and there was an army of people behind her who have used this model, this forecasting model before. This is very standard throughout Massachusetts. So a moment ago when I said that it was the 20-year versus 30-year is relevant to what other communities are doing. In this particular case, this is what other communities are using. This is the standard sheet. But it wasn't just us that created this. This was actually created by a bank, and I have a lot more confidence in them doing this, and that this has been vetted over and over again than.
So I'm hesitant to go through the calculations and the algorithms, and I'm happy to do that if you want, but suffice it to say, as the mayor mentioned, it's the mayor's position to go with the 30-year, which is the second to last spreadsheet you have in this packet. On that spreadsheet, you'll see down the bottom where that 277 number comes from. Everybody see that? I think it's important that people are comfortable that these numbers are actually a reflection of, standard calculations and reasonable assumptions. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has its own calculator, and it's very easy to use, and all you have to do is Google property tax impact calculator. It'll bring you to an Excel spreadsheet on the Mass DOR. And on that sheet, all you have to do is choose Attleboro, choose whether or not it's a split tax rate, which it is, and plug in whatever debt service number you want to. So in this case, if you look at that second to last sheet that I handed out, and you look at the debt payment for 2020, the annual debt service, you'll see a number of $2,455,000. So everybody see that? So I went ahead and plugged that number into the DOR's spreadsheet, and it spit out a calculation for an assessed value of $250,000, an impact of $140.68. Now, if you compare that to the estimated $137.31 that we have on our spreadsheet for a $280,000 house, I'd say we're in the ballpark to what the DOR is doing as well. I don't know what's behind their algorithm, but it's DOR, and I have to believe that they know what they're doing. So I was comfortable that our number for a $280,000 house was very similar to their number for a $250,000 house. And I think, unless you have any questions, that concludes my presentation going through the memo. But again, I'm happy to answer any questions now, and I'm happy to answer any questions going forward.
Sure. Barry, there was a question in our meeting this afternoon about putting a link to the calculator on the city website. Is that something we can do? None of us probably had time to sort that out, but
that's something I have to take up. I would like to do that, but it doesn't mean we can do it.
Okay.
Because that would mean we'd have to. It's possible, but is it probable? I don't know. I'd have to chat with Bill Lennox, our IT director, and find out if we are somehow able to put this spreadsheet into our city website, and also in a user-friendly manner. If we can't do that in a reasonable amount of time, what we probably could do, and actually we do have right here, is the impact on a $100,000 house. And if somebody were to take that impact, and that's the second to the last column from the right, if you take that $100,000 impact on a house, you have the breakdown of the year's worth of payments, and you could just multiply that times the value of your house, and you would get what it is that you would be paying, and you could actually know that. I mean, I would like to do that. I said I'd like to do that in my inaugural address. But like they say, the highway to hell is paved with good intentions. Sometimes you don't get everything you want. We can try. I mean, I can ask.
okay. Councilor Hall and then Delicia.
Yes, this is more just a point. If you could repeat the website where you got it from, and perhaps if Mr. Rhodes could put it in the newspaper for people to do that would be awesome.
The problem, the only problem is that the spreadsheet is just an Excel spreadsheet. So when you Google property tax impact calculator, Massachusetts. It'll bring you to that spreadsheet. So it doesn't have a HTML address that I could repeat, but it'll bring you there. And we can put the link on the website.
That's an easy one.
Yep.
Yep, that's what I was asking, to put the link
right.
to the
Well,
calculator,
and if it's in the
or to the Commonwealth's
And I
calculator,
think
yes.
that we can also very easily put, as the mayor talked about, what the impact is per $100,000, so that people, if I have a $200,000 house, I simply multiply the 100,000 by 200, and I have that number.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Any other, Council Holmes?
But this is kind of, we've already talked about this, but I'm just curious, what will happen with the roof if we don't move forward with this plan? Because we owe, we're paying on off.
Yes, we are. We bonded for that.
So what exactly do we owe right now?
I don't know what the balance is, but we'll continue to pay it, and we have to pay it anyway. So this doesn't pay off the loan. We will still carry the debt service for the Attleboro High School roof going forward, no matter what.
Okay.
This is only what MSBA is saying, we want this back. This is a portion of what we dished out for you. We want a portion back.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions? Council Cobus?
Sure. So, which one first? Had you guys considered switching it up and not doing 30 years for all three of the bonds and reducing potentially that third $5 million bond? And in addition to that, when is the bond configuration sort of finalized? When, like, can this still change? When do we apply for the bonds and all of that? Can it change after the vote?
We have a timeline that we have to follow in order to stay on schedule to make sure, okay, so by March 15th, I have to let her know a lot of information for the other loan that we have. But this is pretty much what we need to go with. After the vote, we can tweak things, but then there'll be a timeline for that as well. So we haven't set that timeline yet because I don't think we've finalized any of this yet. We can't go forward until we have the vote.
Anytime we back away from 30 years to 25 years, 23 years, 20 years, whatever it is, the impact that it's going to have on what people pay every year is going to increase. So legally, the maximum we're allowed to do is go to 30 years. And even if we can get this school passed at 25 years, I believe we have a moral obligation to the people who are living really tough, really hard, on hard times, really having a hard time making ends meet. I believe that we have a moral obligation to not hurt them the best we can. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we could get this high school to pass at a 15-year bond. We'd have to pay out a lot more money. But at what expense? We're going to be hurting people who are really struggling to make ends meet. A lot of seniors that are living on fixed incomes, people living in poverty or near poverty. So I'm not in favor of backing away from 30 years at all. I'm worried about people who are really down on their luck and really having a hard time, making their monthly bills.
Councilor Conti, and then...
Thank you, Mr. President. I have been pushing for 2 years to try to get some transparency to what the expense would be to a household. I think I talked to Stanley 2 years ago at a assessors conference up in Randolph, saying, how can we do this? And he said, well, a lot of things have to come together before we do it. And I said, I agree, but let's put it on the agenda. And then it was about a year ago, I said to Laura, how can we do this? And well, a lot of things still have to come together. Well, I think we're there. And before the election, Councilor Cobus and I got together with Laura and superintendent of schools and the chairman of the school committee in my house, in my living room. And we saw how code could be written so that we could put up a capital improvement debt exclusion calculator. If you plug in your value, and there's your answer. With a nice chart, and it was a very fine job. And it was such a fine job that I posted it on the Massachusetts Association of Assessing Officials Forum for other communities to take his code and adopt it for their own community. So it can be done, and I'm a huge advocate of transparency. I want the people of Attleboro to be able to go to the city website and ideally plug in their address and see last year's assessment and how would it affect their taxes if it was last year. But I know there's a lot of variables that occur and that make that not so accurate. I got that. But this second to last column, the impact on a $100,000 house, gets you almost there. You are just about to the point where my house is assessed at $353,000 this year, so I can immediately do a little bit of math and know exactly what I'm going to have. In fact, I could build my own spreadsheet. But my feeling is we shouldn't have to do that ourselves, our taxpayers. It should be done by the city. So I would appreciate you being a little bit more aggressive in the website by making a calculator available, a capital improvement debt exclusion calculator available for the taxpayers of Attleboro.
I'm happy to. I mean, you know, I think everybody in the room knows how I post all the work I do on my Facebook page every day.
You do.
I like to be as transparent as I can, but I think every one of us who's in the room who is elected or has been elected, we know we never make promises because sometimes we don't keep them. So it's better just to say, I'll try my hardest. You know, we'll see what we can do about that, and I mean that too, because I said that in my inaugural address on January 2nd. I would like to have this done. I think we're finally at a point where we've nailed down the numbers, and numbers have shifted around a lot because, you know, interest rates change, assumptions change. You know, I'll make an honest effort to that. You know.
And if I may, I just then I'll be quiet the rest of the night. Yes.
Did he just make a promise?
I don't believe it.
Did he just say?
Every time I bring this up, I get shot down. But I believe that this capital improvement debt exclusion is a great opportunity to begin to marry capital planning with the budget process. And I believe that this is the most glaring example of exactly why we should do that. And I sent you an email today and I said, let's see if we can try to address this. And my feeling is that if this city does not shortly take steps towards a 5-year financial plan that would include a debt policy, the debt policy that we just struck from the books a week ago, that was written by 9 former councils, of which only 1 is still on the council. So this is not something new. This was 2006 city councilors put in a piece of new business saying we need a debt policy for the city of Attleboro. 2006.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with the.
Every time I bring it up, I get shot down.
Well, I'm not shooting you down.
Hold on, what is your point of order,
My
Councilor
point of
Perica?
order is that this doesn't have anything to do with the loan authorization that this public hearing is being held for.
You're absolutely correct. Councilor
you.
Conti, do you have another question?
I'm done.
Okay. If I may speak to that, you know.
No.
No. Okay. Very good.
Thank you. Councilor Kovas.
So, in 2008, our debt spending as a percent of our total budget was 7%. It's since decreased and decreased and decreased to, in 2018, we're at 3.3%, as far as I know. How much, can we get a commitment for a year-over-year amount that we're willing to spend out of our existing budget towards paying this down so that we can sort of show the residents we're in this together? I know you talked about the $3 million or whatever the difference is, but for the course of your term as mayor, can you talk about that?
Yeah, going from a debt capacity around 7% of the operating budget down to 3%, now that 4% delta has been used up by the operating budget. So previously we were using that money, that 4% on debt service payments. But the previous administration, for its own reasons, and I don't judge those or say they're right or wrong, it moved us away from having 7% of our operating budget to debt to 3%. That's not right, it's not wrong, it just is what it is. So if we were to start moving back to 5%, 6%, 7% of the operating budget, my question is, what are you willing to cut from the budget? Because that money is actually being used by the operating budget right now. So it's not like that's just lingering around out there. It's actually being used. There was, you know, one person suggested that we use the $750,000 from retired debt from the Thatcher School that was retired. You know, the debt service we paid off on that. But that $750,000 wasn't money we actually had in our operating budget. That was money we were getting from the state. So that's not money we can suddenly apply to this project. We've talked about, you know, I talked about in my inaugural address and during the campaign using new revenues from marijuana industry, you know, the cannabis industry here in Attleboro, but I made a commitment that would go to the operating budget of the schools. You know, most of it, if not all of it, because while getting a new school is very important, making sure we have teachers to teach in those classrooms is probably more important. You know, a building's just a building. You know, but we need to make sure that we actually have the teachers there. That's why that money I'm talking about dedicating. So, and I've talked to constituents, and all of us in the room, who've probably suggested both. You know, we should use more of our existing revenues to pay for, you know, some of this school. We've made a commitment that I think is reasonable and it's balanced with trying to decrease the impact on, you know, constituents while also not negatively impacting other city departments. That's all I have to say about that.
Councilor Hall.
Sure. I'm going to ask some questions that were sent in by constituents. You may have already got them, but I just want to be able to ask them so that we can have them answered here. And it's really good to do that because then people know we really do listen to them and we're able to answer their questions. So, so I don't think it's anything you haven't heard, hopefully. So I'm not going to throw you a ringer, hopefully. But what about any of the tax debts that are out there? And they did mention in particular ARA money. In other words, have we tried to collect all the debts that we've tried? And someone actually asked, you know, people asked this, you know, because they heard about it in the paper. So could you just make a comment about that?
I believe that's beyond the scope of what we're discussing.
Well, no, it's to help bring down the debt on the loans.
So hold on for a minute.
Yeah.
Councilor Holmes, did I hear you say point of order?
Yes.
What is the point of order?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the loan authorization that we're talking about. It has to do with a different issue.
Right. I would agree that the payment of outstanding debts to the city is not part of what we're talking about.
To help reduce the loan?
Right. Yeah, I think that they presented what they plan to do to reduce the loan. That's not one of them.
Okay. Just a constituent asked, that's why I'm bringing
absolutely.
it up. Thank you. Can I ask the second question?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then there was also some discussion about assessments and whether we can, and I just want you to answer to it. Again, it's not whether we can have a better communication or a better process where what people are afraid of is that as we start paying these taxes, that there's still going to be increased assessments on their homes, which I think that's just part of reality. But they were wondering if what we could do to keep that from happening. So while we have this tax increase going on, there's a regular tax increase that goes on with assessments. So if you could address that. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Actually, that is in this calculation. We went through, and what was initially done in the schedule, we were using a fixed rate. So what's in here now is what would be at the bottom of the levy capacity recap. And it's understood that if every year when I come down for the classification hearing, on the average, a running increase on the standard home was about $200 a year. That, because of Proposition 2.5, goes up about $20, $30 a year. But it is been calculated inside of here. Inside of this, not only do you have what it is, but you have the tax rate that we hypothetically say will be applied to that $280,000 home. Okay, so, I mean, it's clear that taxes do not go down. Right. And so every year we're running a rate. The year before the running rate was about $190. Last year the running rate was about $210. Next year, when we go into this year, because of Proposition 2.5 with the structure being, it's going to be about $230 on the average home. So it's the basis of in here. The other thing that you have to understand, that this debt goes into the bottom of the recap. So that in turn shows a higher per thousand rate standalone. So that these numbers that you see in here are the basis of a calculation, including Proposition 2.5 and including the bonding. So there's nothing we can do to reduce the tax increase because it's fair and equitable on all taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for answering that. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Copus, did I see you? And Councilor
Yes.
Holmes.
And hopefully this is my last question. And so regarding that, and because we are calculating in the 3.5% levy increases year over year in all of these calculations, and that's growing, but we're not calculating in year over year growth for the household numbers. So we're talking about a $280,000 house that's worth $280,000 now, or assessed at $280,000 now, and also assessed at $280,000 30 years from now. Can you talk to why, which changes what the payment would be and changes these numbers drastically if you include growth of the actual household numbers, which is why the calculator I created online, the numbers are very different because we calculated in growth. So can you talk about why growth isn't included on this sheet?
Well, growth is included in this sheet because you yourself said the average growth for the city of Attleboro, which we call growth in itself, not the growth of values, but the growth of outside new construction and so forth. We put in the average is 1%. You heard him mention Proposition 2.5 is 2.5%. Growth on the average for the city of Attleboro is about 1% of the total assessed value of the city. So we did put that in, as you know. I mean, I will say to you that I extend my thanks to Councilor Cobus, because we extensively talked throughout this whole process about his spreadsheet, and he does have a very good calculator. I will tell you that we have growth in there, you know that. Now the 280 or 289 that's in there, that was just for a basis of today. Anything that you say, or what Barry mentioned, use the 100,000 relative to whatever your value is. That's going to give you your home value. The 280 was just to give people the basis of what the average is today. As you go down through this spreadsheet, there's a new per thousand rate. And if you hypothetically want to say to yourself, the increase that exists in your value of your home, tracking the 3-year history of what's happened in the city, and push it out 3 years, you can take a home that, like 3 years ago, the 280 was 255. So take that and say, all right, 3 years from now, if I have the 280 home, it's probably going to be 302 or 320. Do whatever you want and use that 100,000 because that's the true number in the calculator.
So the 280 number isn't really something to look at beyond the first year?
It's not something beyond the first year. It was in here to say, here's your starting point, here's what it is today. Don't use that beyond that point. That's why I will say to you, Councilor Copus has a calculator where you can, but I do want to say, it's a very efficient, and I've looked at it, and I would say that we have talked about internal in our group, seeing what we could do to take that and apply it into the city.
If we were to create a calculator that wasn't based on a $100,000 impact, per $100,000, because economic forecasting and modeling is based on assumptions, we'd also have to calculate in the growth of wages, because this is a relative statement and it's the way people conceptualize and look at something. So even if we were to look at the cost of a house 15 or 20 years from now, relative to how much that's going to cost is how much you're earning. So then we'd also have to calculate that in for inflation and subtract that calculation to reverse it back in today's dollars, so that way it would be basically a relative cost. Ultimately, you'd end up with the same price. You'd end up with basically the same dollar, because it would all be relative. So what Councilor Cobus is talking about, we could do that, but then, like I said, economic forecasting is all about assumptions. We'd have to add other assumptions in to make it relative, because a house that's valued at a lot more in the future is also going to be paid by people who are earning a lot more in the future because of inflation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the reimbursement rate is 66.65%, that's what, okay. And could you speak a little bit to the excluded costs, just so
Sure.
people are aware of?
So if you go to the Form 3011, which is the MSBA's two-sided spreadsheet, so for example, if you go to the front sheet and you go two-thirds of the way down, in the column that says scope items excluded from the estimated basis, column, go all the way down until you reach that $1 million number, electrical. Those are permits, those are electrical permits that would be excluded. The MSBA does not reimburse for that. Beyond that is the asbestos containing material, which we included in bringing the cost down to $266 million. That was an excluded cost anyway. That's another example. And then, so those are two examples of what the MSBA is not willing to pay for.
But it's things that are necessary.
Oh, absolutely. Everything on this sheet is necessary, but there are some things, as the mayor mentioned earlier, the MSBA will not pay for central office construction. It just will not. So it's excluded. That's just one of their rules.
Thank you.
Council.
I'm just going to rephrase my question so everybody can know clearly the answer. You have done everything in your power to look at ways that you could reduce this loan before we go into this hole.
To the best of our knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you.
As of right now, there's nothing else we can do that I know of, and we have a large team of people working on this. I believe the school side, superintendent and the school committee would probably say the same, but we'll let them speak for themselves. There's nothing, I mean, I came in and one of the first things I said is, how can we make this more affordable to people? I took a little bit of heat from that. Some people assumed that meant that I was suggesting we start cutting CTEs and everything. Here's the thing though, if we did that, we have to, basically redesign the entire school. The cost of construction goes up, $650,000 a month, $9 million a year. We might not end up saving anything by trying to do that. So we've looked at everything we can really do. I came in on the 1 yard line with a fresh set of eyes. I couldn't find anything else. Barry found over $1 million. We found the $6 million. We can't think of anything else.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's what people need to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions? No.
One other question. So Unibank, this is the process, and this is what they're used to doing this. They've gone through this process many times, and
That's correct.
Yeah, many cities and towns utilize this format. It just depends on how long they go based on how much they're borrowing. All these spreadsheets came from Unibank, and then we factored in the growth factors that Stan talked about and gave you the average and the median. So all of these have been done from Unibanks. We've been using them for as long as I can think of. They're very trusted. So many people use them. Our financial advisor is fantastic. She comes in, we ask questions, she'll spend the time and tell us every little detail about it. So.
Excellent. Any other questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here that has anything new to add that would like to speak in favor? Anyone? Mr. Adler?
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. In this wonderful, nice night tonight.
Yeah, Barry can switch it. Can you switch the microphone, Barry? Thank you.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that I really think we owe this to our children, our grandchildren. We don't have any children or grandchildren, except maybe a godchild or two that are
children.
That are in the school system.
Charlie, here, just introduce name and address for the record.
Charles Adler, 24th Street.
Thank you.
I'm Barbara Clark, 24th Street.
So again, I just think we owe it to our children to do this. I went to school at Bridgewater Rainham High School. It was a new school when I entered in 1962. The citizens of Bridgewater and Rainham have built a new high school for the new generation of students, and I hope that we can do the same. One thing I did hear about, I thought there was some provision in existing state law that would allow the city to give a break to seniors, and we're not looking for this for ourselves, but seniors on fixed incomes who might be able to get a discount on their real estate taxes according to one or more state provisions. And so I would hope that you could.
Yeah, so I did actually speak with the mayor about that, and Barry, about any and all exemptions, not just senior exemptions. And we are planning to talk through what those exemptions could be and which ones we would be willing to adopt and what the impact would be. So that's coming.
Okay, yeah, great, because I mean, I don't remember the numbers, but I thought I heard that we already have one of those options in place, but maybe it's within the council's power to increase the limit or reduce the eligibility so that more seniors could take advantage of it. And
again, we're going to do an exercise in exemptions and what we could and or should do going forward for exemptions.
Right, and anything like that that becomes known before the vote would certainly be.
Yes, definitely. It's on the fast track. It's on the Excella.
It's on the Excella. Thank you.
As long as it doesn't derail.
Yes, thank you. And just for your,
Mr. Adler.
I've been working with Madeline and speaking to Madeline about some of the programs, just so, because it's really important to understand from there. Sometimes it sounds like a great idea.
Julie,
point of order. Yeah. Sorry.
We don't want to get into it. I've been here most of the afternoon.
Okay, good.
And we talked, the top of my page is senior exemption. So we are, like I said, it's on the Acela, and we are going to evaluate them and then present them to the council for vetting. So are there any other questions? Anyone else to speak in favor? Come on out.
Yes, my name is Roy Belcher. My two daughters graduated from Attleboro High School, and I have to say that at the time, the teaching staff was pretty highly regarded, but the building was not. And that was, my daughters are now in their mid-40s, and the school hasn't improved any, the building hasn't improved any since the time that they were there. I've noted from articles in the paper that replacing the school at this time is the most logical time because interest rates are on the rise. They're at historic lows, or they were in the last couple of years. And so if we don't do it now, it's going to be far more painful for senior citizens and all taxpayers if we postpone. And the other thing is that in the distant past, I worked on the Economic Development Committee for the strategic plan for the city. And one of the key drivers of economic growth is to have a community that has a quality school system. If we have a school system with a poor reputation, businesses would prefer to locate somewhere else. And for the city to compete in today's pretty healthy economy in Massachusetts, we really need to do something about the school system. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you.
Mr. Belcher, what's your address for the record?
6 Nancy Avenue in Attleboro.
Do you have power?
No.
Well, we're glad you came. You have lights here.
Lights and heat here. Is there anyone else to speak in favor?
Good evening, Your Honorable Body. My name is Bill Larson. I live at 142 Fairway Drive. I'm also a co-owner of Larson Tool and Stamping. And in full disclosure, I am a member of the Attleboro School Committee. I think it's very appropriate that we're here tonight speaking about building a new high school. As many of you know, some of you might not, it is Dr. Seuss Week. We had an opportunity this morning to spend some time with some third graders who are really looking forward to this new building being built because they'll be able to take advantage of it. So I strongly encourage you, if the vote passes, to borrow the money and let's build it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Larson? No? Is there anyone else to speak in favor?
Good evening, councilors. Robert Geddes, 27 Zarek Drive. I think I could talk for hours about all the reasons why we should build this high school. Obviously, I think I already have, probably. all of the cost discussion aside, just from an educational component, this is absolutely the best opportunity for our community and our students. So I will leave it at that for now. But I will say that anyone that does have any doubt about the need for a new high school or any doubt about the validity of the plan before us, I would encourage you this Sunday, we are doing a tour of the current building at noon. You can start in the mini auditorium with us. We'll walk you through the building, tell you what needs to be addressed in the current building and why it is not feasible to repair or replace these systems. Monday night at 7 p.m. at the library, we will be doing a formal presentation that goes into a little bit more detail about the educational components of the new design. If you cannot attend either of those, AACS has copious amounts of discussion from previous tours, previous meetings. I think you can still access the meeting that happened, the joint meeting between this body and the school committee from March 1st of last year, where we reviewed the 7 options we had, including a repair option, 3 renovations, and 3 new buildings. So please, I beg of all of the voters of Attleboro to get as much information, research this as much as possible before making a decision. And feel free to go back to the archives. Mr. Cooper referenced the city's website that has school building committee minutes and notes from the 2+ years of work that they've put into this. So those would be my comments for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in favor?
They're looking for the baby.
Yes, first in David Quinn, 39 Prospect Street. First and foremost, Zachary sends his regards, and unlike his mother, aunt, and 2 uncles who went to a dated, to say, put it generously, Attleboro High School, he hopes to attend a brand new Attleboro High School in 14 and a half years from now. So I think this is a really
Don't rush it.
exciting time. Now I'm enjoying every minute. This is a really exciting time for our city. The plans for a beautiful, modern, 21st century school is what's needed. Those of you who know me know 2 things. I'm a history teacher, so I'm a little bit of a history buff. And I also live in the shadow of the original high school. And in going through some of the library archives, the city leaders who are sitting, in your shoes at this point, addressed the community and called the original high school a wise investment for the present and future well-being of Attleboro. They further went on that this school is not a luxury, it's an immediate necessity that the children of Attleboro may receive a proper high school education. I believe we're in the same state now. As an education professional myself, I have the opportunity to go to high schools throughout the state. We're well behind. With this project, we can get there. We can give the future citizens of Attleboro the resources that they need to complement the outstanding teachers that we have in our district. I urge you to vote yes, and I urge the community to vote yes on this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? I'm sorry. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone neither for nor against? Anyone?
He spoke last night.
I know.
Sorry.
Hi, Steve Hosmer, 164 Downing Drive in Attleboro.
Steve,
one of the things that I have not heard is the fact, excuse me?
Sir, you have already addressed the council. This meeting was recessed, and you also, I understand you submitted some questions to the council as well, and a document you wanted us to receive, which we have submitted to the clerk and will be distributed to the council. But you cannot address, this is for new testimony, anyone that hasn't addressed the council previously.
So I can't ask a question?
That's right.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, would you like to close this public hearing?
I would.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I just, President Cooper, and Councilor DeLisio, thank you so much for having the mayor back this evening. Personally, last night I thought I was expecting what we did receive this evening, more so for the general public. And especially since last week you had said he was coming with a PowerPoint presentation. That didn't happen, but still at least the public finally heard from the mayor and his financial team. And it wasn't us that he needs to convince that we need a new high school. He needs to convince the voters. And hopefully he was strong enough this evening with his words and his financial team to convince the voters that the high school is a well-needed factor in the city of Attleboro at this time. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
As much as we all didn't want to come out in this nasty weather and on a Friday night, but I'm glad we did.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, would you like to close this public hearing?
I would.
Thank you. I'm declaring this public hearing closed. We are having a committee meeting next week at 6 o'clock for budget and appropriations, and that has been posted. So, moving on to committee. Oh, Council Conti, do you have something?
Are you about to recognize capital improvements?
I am.
Good. So I'd like to, reporting for capital improvements and city development.
Yes.
I would like to announce that the scheduled visitations for tomorrow, March 3rd, have been postponed to April 7th, same time, same location, April 7th, not tomorrow. The Parks and Forestry Department has their hands full, and we'll see them after they're well rested on April 7th. Thank you for the opportunity to inform the public, and we look forward to our meeting at the next available time.
Thank you. Council Kobus.
All right, reporting for the Committee on Zoning and Land Use from the docket of November 21st, 2018. I move to refer the following matter to the Planning Board for study and recommendation and to hold a joint public hearing Tuesday, March 20th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the City Council Chamber, 77 Park Street, relative to the following matter. To amend Section 17-10.15, registered marijuana dispensary uses, subsection B2D and subsection D1A of the revised ordinance of the City of Attleboro.
Second? Oh,
Permission to waive the reading?
Yes.
second?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Council Preca. Motion is in order. Council Kobus.
This is an update to the RMD to clarify the existing ordinance on a number of specific items, specifically removing the restriction that no two RMDs may be located near each other, removing restrictions that an RMD may not be located near an adult entertainment establishment, setting all the measurements to 500 feet, and clarifying how all the measurements are calculated. This is what we discussed on Tuesday during the committee meeting, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Council Kobus? This requires a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Hearing none. Motion passes 11-0. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned at 8:13. Thank you, and everyone be safe driving home.
I gotta go watch this cop now that I know. You gotta go watch this.
Can somebody go to my house and see if I have power before I go home?
I'll borrow it. I see. I think it was